You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this extremely cold edition of the Big Cast. My name's John Best, and I live in Narnia. And with me is Glenn Sarvati. Glenn, how are you?
I'm maybe a little less cold than you. I'm not sure, but I'm doing
Greetings from Narnia.
okay.
It is just right through the wardrobe, and this is where I am. It was
It's funny,
negative 9.
almost on cue, my door blew open as you said that. So we are blustery. I'd put it blustery more than cold. But anyway.
No, all is well here, and I'm excited. I heard you want to talk to me. I've heard you got some questions.
Well, I wanted to give you the opportunity to gloat some more.
I'm always open to that.
Yeah, well, following up, I really enjoyed our predictions episode that we did with John Janklius and Ann Legg a couple weeks ago. One of the things that came up is that we always talk about our Bitcoin price predictions, and your prediction for 2023 was like scary accurate, especially in a year that I think Bitcoin did things that no one else really expected. And quite honestly, I think when we go back and listen to the recording, and we'll put that on there as well.
Now, that was the one where I was sick, right? And I had to record it separately.
Well, the original one, that's right. So maybe you were transporting yourself in time. I'm not sure, but you basically hit the year-end number of Bitcoin pretty much right on the head. I think you said 45K. What at the time that we were recording, I think it was 43.
Yeah, it felt like that was how it was going to lay out, and
you did predict it was going to fall a lot further than it did, which I thought was interesting. We actually, last year it never really declined any further than it was at the start of the year. It's an underreported story. Go ahead.
Yeah, it really is. It should be headlines, but it's not. John Best was right for once. I think that the reason I anticipated a greater fall was crypto was really just crashing so hard. And I really thought something like Binance, or I didn't know if it was going to be Binance or who it was going to be. It turned out to be Binance, but I knew there was a couple other big players that were probably going to fall, particularly around, some of the stable coins. And I thought, wow, that's just going to really drive it down. As a matter of fact, I was kind of hoping, because I, was planning on buying at the bottom of that. But no, it didn't get quite down that far. And it took longer for FTX and some of the other players to play out than I thought it would. So,
but having said that, I mean, the fact that it didn't fall that far seemed to kind of establish some degree of a floor, and probably enabled the number to run back up by the end of the year.
Yeah, I like I said, I thought that, okay, with a halving and the limited availability, plus if we look at continued recovery, particularly in the supply chain, I just knew that, hey, I believe this is still being used. And you look at like JP Morgan coin, some of those other things that leverage this, it's more than just sort of a hobby. And I think that's what people have to realize.
Well, and we're not going to talk just about Bitcoin here, but I wanted to kind of follow up. I think this is almost like a part 2 of our predictions episode, because you and I have talked about some other things that wound up not getting discussed on our earlier episode, and I want to follow up on those too. But kind of continuing, not with Bitcoin specifically or even crypto, but blockchain behind the scenes. You made a really good point that blockchain has been, to some extent, a solution in search of a problem for a while now. And as you see it, we've finally got the problem.
Oh yeah, we're going to have a huge problem. I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but have you seen how Sam Altman describes, the procession or the progression of products with regard to how he feels about, the platform? He basically said GPT-3 was horrible, GPT-4 was barely acceptable, and GPT-5 will be okay. And I was reading through Reddit last night, and there's a group of people really focused on this, and some of the OpenAI engineers are in there, and they're kind of talking about what this next level is going to look like. And I think we're going to be we're going to go through the whole entire process again when they release GPT-5. And by that process, I mean, first it'll be, oh my God, look what it's doing now. Then it'll be, how quickly can we get it? And then it's going to eat the world and destroy everything. But, the reason I bring that up is because as it becomes more fluent, as it becomes more of a significant part of our everyday lives, which is what's happening currently, we need a way to determine what's AI, what's not, and information, particularly data, as we've just learned by the New York Times suing OpenAI, which, probably the big cat should sue them. I'm sure they have our stuff in there, and we have lots of episodes, so we should probably look into that. But the idea that all of the information used to train these platforms is going to be democratized. Well, there are two challenges with that. What information do you use?
Wait.
What's
Let me just clarify.
Go ahead.
The word democratized actually means taken and used for free. Is that a synonym at this point, or the definition of democratized?
That's kind of what they're saying. And if we're not careful, that's what's going to happen. And so we've got to find a way to, make sure that that thoughts and ideas, and in particular facts, have a place where they can be denoted as facts. Now, some things don't need to be put that way. For example, if I tell you the sky is blue, you could go out and look, right? But if I tell you
at this point, I'm not sure somebody wouldn't try to refute that, but
true. But if I tell you, I think, that this is what happened in the war on Iraq, from 2001, this is what the official line is. Everybody and anyone can say, no, it was this, it was that. I read this, I read that. And the truth, whatever that is, begins to become diluted. So the idea that blockchain could be a consensus platform for facts that is used in the training of data will prevent the warnings we've seen already, for example, the poisoning and whatnot. But go ahead.
I like you use the phrase, I think, it becomes the way to validate the source of truth. I mean, it's one of the things when we talked about, whether it's, organics or anything else, we've talked about, tracing the supply chain and making sure that something stays pure through the blockchain. Well, what could be more pure than a fact? So if you actually trace the lineage of where this information is coming from. And you point out large language models, artificial intelligence. I can't imagine. It's really interesting how quickly things shift. When we were talking about uses of blockchain, that one wasn't, it wasn't on my radar in terms of the way I thought it might be applied a year ago, but I can certainly see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that, as we go along, and discover that, not only the facts, but also sources, is another piece of it. But this idea of a consensus platform where these facts cannot be contaminated is really important, because we've already seen contamination. We've seen contamination in social media purposely by other state actors who are looking to manipulate the population. I mean, if you think about it, it really does have sort of an equation to the printing press and the ability to publish and how those thoughts took flight. But now it has not only the ability to sort of publish, but now you have a tool that can effectively reason and is providing, guidance to folks. You look at things like, there's been a lot of talk about the future of medical and how AI is already improving diagnosis, which I could totally see. But that diagnosis wouldn't be great if it's working with, less than reliable facts and data.
Yeah, that's a great. Here's a twist. I haven't even thought through this myself yet, but it just occurred to me. I agree. This sounds incredibly valuable from a cultural standpoint. What's the monetization angle? From a profit motive, how can someone make money on this idea?
Well, I think that's where there's going to be, that's where there's going to be this idea that, here's how I see it playing out, if you want to know, and you sound like you do. So I'm going to tell you. Yeah. So if you think about blockchain and you think about the nodes, there will be, I think, nodes that are kept by groups of individuals like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is run and has, millions of nodes, but those nodes are not government, they're people, individuals. And so, but what makes you trust it is the notion of blockchain, especially with the regard of zero proof or with regards to zero proof and things like that. So I think that there will be almost like that. I think of it a little like when I first started in the IT business, when I was a young kid, one of my jobs that I got from, I was a teacher, and one of my teachers, her husband was like the big lawyer in town. And they had just gotten their first network, and they had bought this law package, which is basically all of their law books on CD. And these I can't remember the name of the company, but you would know it if I said it. It's a big company that provides legal,
I know Westlaw does that, a few others.
yeah, there's a couple of them. I can't remember the name of this one, and it doesn't really matter. But I remember going in and loading, 500 CDs into this thing. I kid you not. To get, this is back when CDs held, not as much data, but to get this whole thing loaded and then getting everybody access and getting them on there. Now everybody was working from the same system and from the same data. And that company was the one that collected all that data. Now, how did they choose which law books to include? How did they, who knows? But as we point out in this particular situation, you mentioned Westlaw. I don't think this company is Westlaw. It was something net. I can't remember the name of it, but there are several to choose from. And why would you choose between them if they all do the same thing, if they're all just facts? Well, I think it's how it's organized, what they chose, how they put it together, and also cost. So in this case, I think that one of our big problems with AI is the fact that we're trying to design this super duper AI that can pass the bar and is an engineer and could be a physicist and do quantum mechanics and all of these things. Whereas when you look at its purpose, it doesn't need to do all that. There is probably going to be an agent, and that agent will be good at the law. And there'll be an agent that's good at medical, and there'll be an agent that's good for physicists, and so forth and so on. Their data constructs are going to be, I think, operated in the same way. But instead of 1,000 CDs that were sent to me, it's going to come from thousands and thousands of nodes that are operated by people who have a vested interest in providing this service and not having bad data in their system.
That has a lot of merit to me. And I'm just thinking about this. I haven't thought it through, so this could be off base, but it also occurs to me that, one of the problems that we've had over the course of the last, throughout the age of the internet, basically going back to Napster and whatnot, is the devaluation of intellectual property, that it becomes free and therefore you lose the motivation to actually create it. It sounds to me like if you can therefore retain or reinstitute the purity, the validation that this stuff is good, you might actually be able to kind of reassess or reassert some of the value of the effort to put that kind of information together.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
And I think I would absolutely agree. That's right where I was going. You hit the nail on the head.
You mentioned some of the stuff that you mentioned with Sam Altman too. I will post a link to this. I saw a fascinating conversation that took place at Davos this past week. The Economist's editor-in-chief sat down for 30 minutes on stage with Sam Altman of OpenAI and Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who happens to be the biggest investor in OpenAI.
Also, now the largest company in the world.
That's right. And that was one of the points that they made. And I have got to believe that part of that reason is because people are, attributing the value of OpenAI into the company too. It's one way to invest in OpenAI. It was a great, fascinating conversation. It was not happy talk. Zanny Mitten-Beddoes is the name of the woman, and who's the editor, and she persisted. She continued, she pressed for answers when people tried to soft pedal some things. I thought it was really interesting. One of the points that Sam made was, when we put out ChatGPT 4, everybody kind of had this collective freak out for about 2 weeks, is the way he put it, which is kind of what you were just saying too. And then his perception is after that, now they're kind of going, what's taking so long? Where's the next one? And everybody's anticipating the next one as if they've kind of fallen behind after, making this incredible, kind of strides forward over the course of the last year or so. There's a 4-minute version of it that they've edited down that we'll post. I'll also post for those, it's behind a subscriber wall.
You're talking about the World Economic Forum in
exactly,
in
the World Economic Forum in Davos. And I'll post the full 30-minute version as well. You do need a subscription to The Economist to get to it, but if you've got access to it, I found it to be absolutely fascinating. And there's a lot going on there, and I think that it would be very difficult to overstate just how much interesting things will be coming out of it, whether or not you're a pessimist or an optimist. And I know plenty of people on both sides.
Yeah, I think I think Sam's right. And I read that article. That's where I picked up some of the other stuff. He said the evolution is going to be uncomfortable. That was one of the other things he said on stage.
Well, he is on the circuit these days, which I wonder. It's like at some point you spend more time being a celebrity and a speaker than you do actually working. I think his heart is in the right place, and he wants to be in the laboratory too and helping push this thing forward. But on the other hand, if you become this recluse that nobody knows what you're doing, I think it just creates suspicion. So I think he's doing the right thing right now by getting out there and letting people hear things directly from himself.
Well, I think he's also managing expectations.
True.
I think that there's never, ever been, if I said, hey, we got this, imagine that instead of AI, he had, I don't know, I'm just going to use fire. That's the best thing I can think of. Fire. Like none of us had seen fire before. And he's telling us, listen, fire 5.0 will burn much, much hotter. And it's going to be like, what do you mean, Sam? Well, let's say you wanted to burn bodies and leave no trace. Well, this is going to be able to do that.
This is dark.
That's not good, because we depend on the evidence from the bodies to find out what happened. I know, but it also has a lot of other benefits besides burning bodies, and so I don't know how I got there. Anyways, take it or leave it.
I am creeped out. I'm not sure about this one.
But that's where my head is. It's such a drastic invention that someone has to be out there, I think, setting expectations or managing expectations, because it's just, I mean, think about it. I still can't believe we get to live in this time and see this stuff. It's amazing. I wish my dad had lived to see this. I really do.
Another expression, I know it's not yours, but you threw this one out there too. And I think that was kind of, to some extent, what you're talking about with the source of truth and the blockchain aspect of tracking the facts and the lineage. The whole idea of explainable AI, the fact that people want to understand how it works. They don't want it to be a black box. And I like that idea. Like if you cordon it off and have a specific subject matter expert module for legal versus whatever, I'm not sure, medical, the different very specific fraud detection, things like that. I think that maybe helps people get a little bit more comfortable in terms of getting their heads around it.
Well, I think it's just like humans, right? We don't need, we don't need, I don't need my mechanic to also be able to do brain surgery.
Exactly.
And so, that's an obvious way that this will go because it's very expensive. But the other thing I pointed out in the Innovation Club meeting that we were talking about is this cost of training. And it's very similar. And the cost of training, and this was a prediction from ARK Investments, which is Kathy Wood's group.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the cost of training will go down further is a little like what also caused the fintech evolution or revolution, really, because what was holding back fintechs, if you go back and look in time, what was holding back, products that were going to be, financial adjacent or fintech in a way, not banks, but stuff that works with your finances, was the need for all the regulatory pieces, including the data center and the expense of it. But then the cloud began to drive that down. And that was the invention. So it used to be, to get into the business, it was, at least $500,000 just in creating infrastructure. But then that got reduced and reduced and reduced down to where AWS and those sorts of things made it very obtainable to try a startup and do that. So I could sort of equate that same idea with the cost of training. And, what's keeping everybody out of this game right now is that training is, is very, very expensive. And there's a chance you might get sued, right? Because why do you think none of these guys are disclosing the data that they use to train? You sort of have to figure it out yourself. You have to go in
Yeah.
there and kind of, jimmy it. But I guarantee you, my writing, your writing, we both know it's in there because early on we asked it and it said, yeah, I know who you are. I read everything you've ever written. And so with that in mind, this whole idea of training is really, I think, at the core of all this. So two things that can reduce training. One is we're seeing incredible advancements from folks like NVIDIA, AMD, Cray, their slingshot systems that are now basically solving the technical problem of training in a way that's much more cost effective. It's much faster. And that'll continue to evolve because now instead of trying to use these GPUs that were also meant to be gaming devices or GPUs that also had a lot of other use cases, we're understanding more and more about this technology and developing direct systems that can help facilitate that. Now, as training costs go down, what's left for cost? And this circles us all the way back to the blockchain idea. So is it about the training cost or is it about the data that you use? Well, guess what? Credit unions are just overflowing with data. We know what you spend your money on. And I've said it.
Payments are as rich a source of data as you're going to find. Yes.
Right. So, and I like to say we are what we buy. And so you and that with some of the other data that we have, and you've got a pretty incredible opportunity to create some, what I fully expect to see is, and I've said this before, is I fully expect to see, kind of like autonomous cars, I fully expect to see the autonomous account that just takes care of itself. And if Sam's right about GPT-5's ability to reason, that's the real important thing, reason, then it will happen. So
the interesting twist to that is it covers one side of the equation. It doesn't help you earn. It can help you manage the outflows, but what's it going to say? Excuse me, this is ChatGPT tapping you on the shoulder. You really got to go out and figure out a way to earn about 20% more because you're spending too much money.
Yeah, and there, and that may be its next ability is. Oh, by the way, I've noticed that you're spending a lot on home improvement. Let's get you a HELOC, or whatever. So I just think that we're going to see some pretty incredible stuff very quickly.
And speaking of that, that's a little bit in the direction. The next thing I wanted to talk about, because bringing together two of the big predictions of the year, you also talked about how you think AI is going to be a big catalyst to kind of move the open banking movement forward too, which I find to be an interesting twist. And I think we both agree Gen AI is going to continue to be a big story. And I think we're also in agreement that open banking is going to be moving forward, especially in the US. The two together is a pretty fascinating kind of peanut butter moment.
Yeah. So let me deep dive on that a little bit. So what we see is, first of all, the CFPB, and I'll let you speak to that, but they've put out some things regarding open banking. So we know it's coming. We've always known it's coming. We're going to be right behind it. But one of the things you could kind of always count on was that API programming. And let me tell everybody what API means. It's the application programming interface. It's a list of commands. So for example, imagine you had a website and the website was www.yourbank.com. And, there was at the end of it, you would put API and then you would put / transfers. And when you did that, a form would come up and that form would say, where you want to transfer from, where you want to transfer to, is it a recurring transfer? Is there any, let's say it's a mortgage transfer. Does it go to escrow? Does it go directly to principal? All these things, right? So, and just a transfer command. Then what you have to do is let's say you're connecting to this system, you need to code all that. You need to sit down and say, when a customer uses whatever platform I'm providing to gain access to this bank or credit union via this API, I have to translate from my system into this form, meaning that let's say, and I'll use a simple example, recurring transfers. So let's say that this particular bank does biweekly, weekly, and bi-monthly, which by the way sounds like biweekly, right? Or no, pardon me, bi-monthly or every 2
Semi-monthly,
weeks.
right?
Yeah, semi-monthly, right? So there's all this different terminology and different systems because they were built at different times, all have different ways of doing it. Now, you're going to have to figure out a way to reconcile what the customer wants or the member wants with what the bank provides. So if I say I want to make this payment every week and there really isn't an option for that, there is an option for, every 7 days. I'm just using examples here. Every X amount of days instead of, a biweekly or whatever. So it gives you more flexibility, but it's built differently. Somebody has to write the code to take what's on the screen and being shown to the customer or told by the customer so that it matches what comes into the bank and their interface and their system. That can take a long time. And as a result of that, nobody's been super worried about, this taking over the world and leaving credit unions and community banks with basically a DDA crap pile, right? All you really are is a place that the money goes in and out, and you're stuck with all the regulatory stuff, but none of the benefit.
The paycheck motel, as our friend Ron Shevlin used to call it. Maybe
yes, I love Ron. That is such a great name. So how will AI affect this? Well, all that work to figure out how one thing talks to another and all the coding and all the programming hours probably can just go away, because what you would do is you tell the AI interface, here is this, here's yourbank.com/API/transfers. Learn this. Here's our system. You decide what goes where with what comes in, and you populate it. And here are your rules. If you don't have a choice, do this. If you, just like a prompt, right? We talk about prompt engineering. You are a facilitator between two APIs, and your job is to, translate the information between the two. So by doing that, there isn't any coding. It's just connect the two things. Here's your access to this. Here's your access to this. You serve as the middleman, and you do a good job of translating that. Now, right now, that would not do very well, because while the darn thing is pretty darn smart, as we all know, it's prone to some reasoning issues. Like, oh, you want to pay it, every week? Well, it'd be even better than that, every hour. Let's do it like that. And God knows, what it would do. But we're definitely on a path where we're going to have tools and things that will do that. And we'll take all of that programming. It's almost what Drummond Reed, one of my favorite people and one of the smartest guys I know, used to call the semantic web. The idea that we don't need to translate all these terms or anything, something else will do it. But I know even he didn't envision what we're seeing now with the capabilities of something like a GPT-4 and its ability to be that in between person. So what that's going to do is take weeks and turn it into minutes, and it's going to take hours and turn it into seconds, and everywhere, everything's going to go faster.
That ties to something else that Sam Altman did say in that interview I mentioned as well, is that he said the areas that, when people envision the quantum advancements of ChatGPT, he does think that the thing that it is best equipped to really make, significant improvements on very quickly is programming. He thinks it is a particularly powerful tool on the programming side. So that kind of ties together with what you say. In general, around open banking, what I would say is that it's happening. It's going to be whether you like it or not, and you can question or not whether you think of it as a threat, an opportunity, or a combination of the two, it's very likely going to happen. I mean, the CFPB's request for comment, it was hard to, not read between the lines and see that, we're moving forward, and we're probably not going to diverge too much from the path that they've set on. You can basically kick and scream and complain about it. You could try to play pure defense. I would suggest trying to find a way to make it into a benefit at the same time.
Yes.
You're going to need to share data with others. You're not going to be able to avoid it. It doesn't have to be a one-way street. Find a way the other direction. Good. I'm glad we're agreeing on that.
So what's interesting is Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now AI is eating software.
It's a great point.
And everything's software. I mean, everything. Why? Because the more you make, the facilities of the chips and the various technology available to programmers, the more benefit you get. And now, I still don't think we're right at. I believe this year we'll get to the point where if you're any kind of software development company or you have a software development shop and you haven't already sort of invested in AI tools for both code review, for assisting, because I know for a fact, just in my own work, um, then um, just in my own work, it's turned me from basically being one programmer into being like, I would say three or four. And I'm a decent programmer, not the best. So someone who's a really good programmer. So for example, Tom Stacy, our CTO, is a fantastic programmer. I've seen what he's doing. Now he's like 20 programmers.
Wow.
It's amazing because he has all this tedious work, like for example, I mentioned the transfers and I mentioned the API, but what I didn't mention was that the format, the class object. You have to create an object and you have to put like, okay, the source, and you have to put the amount, and we have to know if it's a reg D and blah blah blah. And there's this whole object. Well, you could just tell AI, hey, here's the link. Go make me all the class files. Go make me all the properties. Go make me all the enums. Give me everything. And I'd like it in C#. I'd like it divided this way. I'd like it to be an object oriented. Please do force processing with regard to anything that needs to be set, and send it on its way. And it'll spit out all this code, which is amazing. So I think that if you're not investing in AI for your software developers, it's a huge, huge mistake. Now, that said, the other reason that I think that Sam Altman made that statement was, who's better equipped to deal, like, one thing that should be made to note, that the AI is only as good as what you tell it to do with regard to programming, right?
Yeah.
And so, who's better equipped, one, to tell it what to do, and two, to recognize if it goes off the rails a little bit. I think it's like, for example, much harder for a lawyer to do that because it's very hard to remember all the precedents and all the law books and all that kind of stuff. So it can make up stuff and kind of fool you. But with a programmer, they're going to look at the code, they're going to look at the logic, and presumably, being a good programmer, if there's something in there that doesn't quite jive, they'll see it. And I think that's the other reason it's a real powerful tool for programmers, because they're sort of in the best position to sort of understand how it works and deal with its output.
That's an interesting twist. There is so much more. I mean, I'm sure we will be talking much more, not only about Gen AI, but specifically about open banking. I think there's a lot more to be said on that. But we've been talking for a while. I want to go back and kind of go full circle because we got off the topic pretty quickly. Did I mention you made a really good prediction last year on Bitcoin?
You did, yes.
But one of the things we didn't talk about is, and maybe the market anticipated this, and this may have been a driver of some of the run up toward the end of the year. For the first time, we now have Bitcoin ETFs approved by the SEC, the spot ones, not ones where you have to kind of work your way around it in kind of convoluted fashion through futures contracts. You can actually invest rather than this. I found this to be kind of interesting. I saw at least tell me if you agree with this statement, because I'm just repeating what I read in the press, that rather than having to go through the process of buying your own Bitcoin and incurring significant transaction fees, you can do it indirectly by buying these ETFs and let somebody else do all that kind of background work for you. Kind of ironic to me that we're now talking about Bitcoin having very high transaction fees, which was part of the reason why people were moving into Bitcoin at one point in the first place. But any thoughts on that? I mean, I think that, how much do you think that the ETFs actually drove some of the price run up?
Well, I think it drove it up. I think I mentioned in my prediction, if I remember right, that I thought that some of the things coming down the pike with regard to regulatory, particularly in the investment area, were going to soften it up a bit as well. And I think the idea that the common investor has a tool that can invest in this platform without having to jump through a lot of hoops, like create a wallet and do all the things that go with that. I think that, one, it sort of gives it credibility, I think, and two, it gives access.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and it's interesting to me that, like I say, I think the market so anticipated this that there wasn't any real spike in the price when that SEC approval came out. Nor was there a spike in the price the day before when somebody hacked the SEC Twitter account, X account, and actually put out the approval that hadn't actually happened yet, which I still find pretty bizarre. Again, the story I heard, which if it's true is really sad, is part of the reason they said it happened is that the SEC wasn't using dual factor authentication. Kind of hard to imagine, but that's what I read someplace. I think it was the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I read the same thing. I think we read the same stuff.
Apparently,
I think I send you stuff and you send me stuff. That's what I think happens, but I can't be sure.
But yeah, I think the ETF is definitely a mainstream development, and again,
it's a contributing factor. I think a significant contributing factor.
And it's I don't want to say ironic, but somewhat surprising after all the negatives, the Binances and the FTXs, and again, making it even harder. Those were a couple of the on-ramps that the mass market was using. Well, guess what? It turned out they really weren't very productive or reliable on-ramps or credible on-ramps, whatever word you want to, adjective you want to apply. Well, now all of a sudden you've got some other folks who have gotten in the mix who have a lot of other credibility outside the crypto world. So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
John, I think we've covered a couple of things that I think it's worth kind of following up on. One is you mentioned that everybody ought to be interested in AI at this point at a credit union.
Yeah.
Best Innovation Group's offering services along those lines. I think we should definitely
absolutely. Yeah. Artificial intelligence strategies. We're trying to help through that, small projects just to get everybody's feet wet. We've just been doing a ton with it. We see it as the most significant thing that's happened, well, since Fire.
Fire 5.0.
Fire 5.0.
I'll leave the burning
it burns bodies. It burns bodies. It burns. Well, you wouldn't say that. What you would say is this. You'd say Fire 5.0 can burn up to 2,500 degrees hotter than Fire 4.0. And then somebody would come along and go, wait a minute, that's enough to obliterate a human body to where there's nothing left. And that's how it would happen. So, that's my point. What's going to happen is he's going to announce something that this thing will do. And like anything, there'll be good and bad with it,
Big-fintech.com. There's a drop down for generative AI. Definitely take a look at that.
You could buy shirts now on my website, Fire 5.0. Better than Fire 4.0.
And the other thing we
if you think about it, have we really improved Fire? Anyways, just go ahead. Sorry.
That would be a good one. And it certainly hasn't been the quantum leap anyway. The other thing that we just made a vague reference to there was the Innovation Club. And this is where a lot of these conversations and a lot of these proof of concepts are taking place. Another point,
a lot of smart people
on the website. You can check out the Innovation Club. We'll post a link to that as well.
We'd love to have you.
Meetings, correct?
Yeah, monthly meetings and in person, and we go over various things. You did a great job talking about cost of funds and current liquidity and the state of that, and also trying to just look at how innovation can help with our problems. The things we're trying to solve.
So we'll post links to both of those as well, and and there's been some great conversations on the town hall, and I believe next week on the Big Cast we're going to be excerpting. You did at the beginning of the year a great conversation around basically kind of New Year's resolutions for credit unions. Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I tried to come up with what, if I was a credit union, what would be my New Year's resolutions.
And that episode, that replay is available if you want to listen and watch. That's actually a live event that takes place. But we're doing the next one on January 31. If you want to join live, it's a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, and we're giving away something too.
I heard, but we're keeping that secret for now, as I understand.
Really? I know the secret.
I know you do.
I could tell people.
If anybody wants to join us live, please drop a note. Again, you can join us on the 31st grade. If you can't make it, check out the website anyway. You can always come back and watch the replay. Always very interesting stuff. And as I said, we're going to try to boil it down from the last one from early January into kind of the greatest hits here next week on the Big Cast. John, thanks for taking the time.
Oh no, thank you, Glenn, and thanks for all that you do to boil all this stuff down and to track all this stuff. I know everyone appreciates it, and thanks for all your traveling
and not burn it beyond recognition. Hopefully,
right? Well, Fire 5.0, but yeah.
Take care.
Take care.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.